You're watching Narrify.
It was supposed to be a simple getaway, a chance to breathe, to escape the stress of Portland life. I had found a cabin online, tucked into the forests outside Bend, Oregon. Cedar walls, a stone fireplace, and a porch that looked over the evergreens. After months of long days at the construction site and nights spent barely seeing my wife, I wanted nothing more than a quiet week with my family. My wife, Hannah, our 2-year-old son, Liam, and my younger brother, Derek. That morning, frost clung to the grass as we loaded the SUV. Liam babbled about trees and bears from his car seat, clapping his tiny hands with excitement. Hannah double-checked the lists she had written, sliding neatly labeled bags into the back. Derek tossed his duffel in last, flashing me a grin. "You sure this isn't a work trip disguised as a vacation?" he teased. I laughed. "No laptops. I swear." The drive was long but scenic. The highway wound through red rock, canyons and dense forests. Derek cued an old playlist from our college days, singing off-key, until Hannah joined him. Their laughter, light and easy, made me smile, but a small, unidentifiable tension prickled the back of my neck. I told myself it was just nerves, the stress of travel, nothing more. We stopped at a diner outside Bend for coffee and pancakes. Hannah and Derek seemed inseparable, joking and leaning toward each other in a way that felt close. I tried to ignore the knot forming in my stomach. They had always gotten along, and part of me had invited Derek for exactly this reason. Family felt fuller when he was around. By the time we reached the cabin, afternoon sunlight slanted through the trees. Inside, the air smelled faintly of cedar and dust. Liam ran circles on the rug while Hannah unpacked groceries and Derek started the fireplace. I paused at the doorway, breathing it all in. This was what I wanted: quiet, family warmth. Dinner was simple pasta by candlelight. Liam giggled, sauce smeared across his cheeks. Later, Hannah and Derek carried mugs of wine to the porch. The sky was clear, stars scattered. Across the black, Derek cracked jokes about city life. Hannah laughed until she wiped tears from her eyes. I smiled too, though a small weight pressed against my chest. A tight, uneasy feeling I tried to ignore. The next morning, we hiked the Tumalo Falls Trail. Hannah walked ahead with Derek, swapping earbuds to share a playlist. I trailed behind with Liam on my shoulders. Their voices drifted back in fragments, soft laughter floating through the trees. Each time Hannah turned to check on me, her smile looked genuine, but I couldn't shake the sense that there was a private world forming between them, one I wasn't allowed to see. That night, I stayed up by the dying fire, scrolling through photos from the day. One picture caught my attention. Hannah crouched to tie Liam's shoes, sunlight illuminating her face. Behind her, reflected faintly in the cabin window, was Derek's expression. Focused, protective, almost tender. My throat went dry. I tried to sleep, but every creak of the cabin kept me awake. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe not. Over the next few days, I began observing their interactions more closely. Shared jokes, quick glances, subtle touches on the arm. I told myself it was harmless. Families tease. Brothers and sisters-in-law get along. But a sense of unease had taken root, spreading through my chest with every whispered conversation I overheard. Then came the first night I noticed the whispers. I woke to soft voices from the porch. I stepped outside, expecting a raccoon or some wind-blown branches. But there, they were, Hannah and Derek, talking quietly. Their words were clipped, careful. "He won't notice. I handled it. Just us now." I froze. My stomach churned. I didn't move, didn't interrupt. They laughed softly, their shoulders brushing as they leaned in, before heading back inside. Sleep became impossible. Every time Hannah smiled at me, every time Derek joked, I felt a shadow pressing against my chest. I tried to rationalize it. Exhaustion, stress, paranoia. But the evidence kept piling up in my mind. Something was happening. I just didn't yet know what. By midweek, their secretive behavior escalated. Hannah suggested Derek join her on a morning run. I stayed behind with Liam, pretending not to care while monitoring them from the cabin window. They returned flushed and laughing, sharing jokes that left me out. It wasn't physical, it was psychological, subtle, invisible, but it was a betrayal all the same. Late one night, I found myself outside the cabin, watching the stars, thinking about what I had glimpsed. Their secretive smiles, their hushed words, the way they moved together. It wasn't intimacy in a traditional sense, but it was a partnership I wasn't part of. A conspiracy. My stomach twisted as I realized I was no longer part of my own family's world. The week continued, and my observations grew more meticulous. I started logging every interaction. Times, snippets of conversation, photographs of small gestures. Each piece reinforced my growing understanding. Hannah and Derek were working together, subtly manipulating the environment around me. My chest ached with betrayal. My own brother, the man I had trusted for decades, was conspiring with the woman I had loved more than anything in the world. By the final night of the vacation, I could no longer pretend. The tension in the cabin was unbearable. I watched them, documenting everything, preparing myself for confrontation. I didn't yet know how it would end, only that the moment of truth was coming, and that when it arrived, everything would change. The morning after our last hike, the cabin felt smaller, tighter somehow, as if the walls themselves were pressing in. Hannah and Derek moved through the space with an ease that made me feel like an intruder in my own home. Liam played on the rug, oblivious to the tension that had begun to saturate the air. I tried to focus on him, to find some normalcy in his laughter, but my mind kept returning to the whispered conversations and the subtle glances I had witnessed. We had planned to spend the day exploring a nearby lake, kayaking and taking photos, but I suggested I stay behind with Liam while they went ahead. Hannah hesitated, then smiled and agreed. Derek gave me a quick, conspiratorial grin, the kind of look that sent chills down my spine. I watched them leave, their figures disappearing into the trees, and felt a pit open in my stomach. I didn't want to be paranoid, but the gnawing suspicion that something was deeply wrong refused to let me go. Alone, I tried to organize my thoughts. I took out the notebook I had started days earlier, jotting down every interaction, every smile that had seemed too deliberate, every laugh that had excluded me. My hand shook as I wrote. I remembered moments from our wedding, our early days together, moments I thought were private, only to wonder now if Hannah had practiced them, used them as tools to create trust before exploiting it. I forced myself to breathe. Rational thought, I told myself. Gather the facts before confronting them. By late morning, Hannah and Derek returned from their run around the lake. I noticed, immediately, the subtle changes in their demeanor. Hannah's hair, damp from sweat, clung to her face in a way that made her look more alive than she had in months. Derek's arm brushed hers occasionally, a casual contact that might have been innocent, but after watching them for days, I knew better. They spoke in low tones, their words meant to exclude me even in open conversation. I tried to joke, to make it normal, but the laughter felt hollow. That afternoon, I suggested we all go for a short hike along a less popular trail. Hannah and Derek agreed eagerly, while Liam dozed in the carrier. I lagged behind, as usual, pretending to check my phone for directions. From my vantage point, I could see them up ahead, moving in a way that seemed synchronized. Eyes meeting, gestures mirroring one another, voices soft and deliberate. My chest tightened. Every instinct screamed that I was witnessing something I was never meant to see. As the hike continued, I noticed small things that I hadn't seen before. A touch on the back, a shared laugh at something whispered. Tiny acts that conveyed alliance, intimacy, and secrecy. It was clear that Hannah and Derek had created a private world, and I had been excluded. I felt both anger and disbelief, a dizzying mixture that left me uncertain whether I should confront them immediately or gather more evidence. My mind raced. Could my brother really betray me like this? Could the woman I loved truly orchestrate such manipulation so casually? Back at the cabin, the tension didn't dissipate. I stayed in the kitchen, making sandwiches for Liam, while Hannah and Derek cleaned up from the day. Every glance they exchanged, every whispered word, felt like another brick in a wall that had been built around me. I started checking my phone obsessively, looking for patterns in their messages, anything that might confirm my suspicions. But everything was carefully hidden, encrypted, or deleted. They were meticulous. This wasn't careless betrayal. It was calculated. The next morning, I noticed something even more troubling. Hannah had left her phone on the counter while she brewed coffee. I glanced at it, my heart hammering. There were notifications. Messages from Derek that vanished when I picked up the phone too quickly. They were cautious, subtle, clever. The realization hit me like a punch. I wasn't witnessing an accidental closeness. They were collaborating, plotting even in ways that didn't involve overt acts of infidelity. Yet the emotional betrayal was undeniable. My own brother had been co-opted, a willing participant. I tried to confront them casually that night. At dinner, I asked Derek about his morning run, feigning ignorance of his early departure with Hannah. His answer was too quick, too smooth. Hannah smiled, her tone light, but the tension in her body betrayed her. I could see the small, nearly invisible exchanges, looks, gestures, the way they mirrored each other. My suspicion had grown into certainty. They were conspiring, excluding me, manipulating my perception of reality. Sleep, that night, was impossible. I lay awake in the cabin bed, listening to Hannah's breathing beside me. Derek was in the next room, and I could hear the faint click of his laptop. Late-night messages, plans, coordination. I couldn't intervene, couldn't yet confront them without proof. My mind spiraled through every interaction, every past moment of apparent warmth between Hannah and Derek, wondering if any of it had been genuine or carefully rehearsed. By the fourth day, I had begun keeping a digital record, screenshots, timestamps, photos. Each tiny detail became a piece of the puzzle, a small but critical piece of undeniable truth. I wasn't planning to confront them violently. I wasn't seeking revenge. I just needed the reality in my own hands, tangible and unassailable. My journals filled with observations. Smiles, shared glances, whispered jokes, subtle gestures. I felt both the despair of betrayal and the clarity of documentation. That evening, Hannah suggested we all watch a movie. I pretended to relax, but my gaze constantly flicked to her and Derek. They sat close on the couch, shoulders brushing, exchanging small laughs that were never meant for me. Liam played with blocks at our feet, oblivious to the tension that had coiled into a thick, suffocating presence. I felt the weight of isolation pressing against me, the cold realization that my family had split into two factions. One I could barely access, and one they had quietly created together. By nightfall, the cabin's silence had become oppressive. I stepped onto the porch, staring at the stars, trying to calm the storm in my mind. Every instinct screamed that I needed to act, but I didn't know how. Confrontation would change everything. There was no going back. I felt caught between the desire to protect my son, the need to understand my wife, and the painful betrayal of my own brother. Finally, after hours of pacing and planning, I realized the truth. Hannah and Derek were aligned. Their alliance wasn't just emotional. It was strategic. Every word, every act, every smile had been calculated to exclude me. And in that moment, I understood something fundamental. I had been blind. I had trusted them both, believing in family loyalty, believing in love, and both had weaponized that trust. I didn't yet have all the evidence, but I had enough to know the next few days would define the future. I would observe, record, and prepare for the confrontation that was inevitable. The vacation, which had been meant for rest, had become a crucible of betrayal and realization. And as I watched Hannah and Derek laughing quietly in the kitchen, exchanging another subtle glance that I was never meant to see, I felt the slow, cold surge of resolve. I wasn't going to be blind anymore. The day had started like any other, sunlight cutting through the cabin blinds, Leo babbling in his crib, Hannah humming in the kitchen. But I felt a tension so thick it made the air feel sticky. I had spent the night going over my notes, organizing screenshots, recording times and dates, mapping their patterns. Every small glance, every hidden message, Every whispered word suddenly formed a trail I could follow. I wasn't guessing anymore. I knew. Hannah and Derek were outside, preparing for a short walk along the nearby trail. I suggested that I join them, carrying Leo in the carrier. Hannah hesitated for a moment, then smiled, probably unaware of how much I already knew. Derek offered to carry some of the gear, his tone casual, but I could feel the undercurrent of familiarity between them. I let it slide for now. My goal wasn't to react impulsively. It was to observe, document, and confront with undeniable proof. As we walked, I noticed the subtle synchronicity between them. Derek would glance at Hannah's hand, and she'd look away, almost imperceptibly, but enough to notice. They shared inside jokes, soft and private, as if I wasn't there. I kept my face neutral, pretending to tie Leo's blanket, pretending to check the map. Inside, my chest pounded. The betrayal wasn't abstract anymore. It was tangible, immediate, and relentless. By midday, we returned to the cabin. I had decided I couldn't wait any longer. I needed answers, and they needed to see that I knew. I sat down at the small kitchen table, Leo on my lap, and cleared my throat. Hannah noticed the seriousness in my tone, her smile faltering slightly. "Something's wrong," I said quietly. "I've seen things over the past few days, things I can't ignore." Hannah's eyes narrowed just a fraction, her calm demeanor flickering. Derek leaned against the counter, pretending to sip water but clearly alert. "I know about the way you've been working together," I continued, my voice steady despite the rage building in my chest. "I know the glances, the private jokes, the secrecy. I've been documenting everything." Hannah laughed softly, the kind that tries to dismiss tension. "What are you talking about?" "I've seen enough," I said firmly, "and I'm not asking anymore." I laid my notebook on the table, flipping it open. Screenshots, notes, timelines, all visible. Hannah's composure cracked slightly. Derek's eyes widened. He had underestimated my diligence. "You think this proves anything?" Hannah asked, her voice calm but her hands trembling slightly. "It proves that I know," I replied. "It proves that your careful little plans, the way you've excluded me, manipulated me, even lied about trivial things. It all has a record. And now it stops." Hannah's face turned pale. Derek stepped forward, trying to intervene, but I raised a hand. "Don't. You're both responsible. And I've been patient. But patience ends now." Hannah's usual defenses, the practiced smiles, the casual dismissals, they all failed under the weight of evidence. She tried to redirect, to gaslight, but the proof was clear. The secrecy, the whispered conversations, the moments I had been intentionally kept out of, they were all laid bare. Derek's silence confirmed it. Even if Hannah denied it, his presence and the subtle body language betrayed the alliance they had formed. "You can't just take my family, my trust, my life, and expect nothing to happen," I said, voice rising, though I tried to keep it controlled. "I've lost enough to understand how far this goes. But I will not lose my agency. Not to you. Not to him." Hannah's lips pressed together. She realized, finally, that charm and manipulation weren't enough. Derek's gaze dropped. The silence stretched, oppressive, as if the cabin itself had absorbed the tension. Leo babbled between us, unaware of the storm, the innocence in his voice a stark contrast to the years of betrayal I had endured. By evening, I had laid out every interaction, every evidence of secrecy, and finally they understood. Their alliance had been exposed. Hannah tried to argue, to smile, to charm, but the methodical documentation, the cold facts, left no room for deception. Derek didn't speak. He avoided my eyes, a silent acknowledgement of complicity. I didn't need dramatic confrontation. I didn't need revenge. Their power was gone, evaporated in the quiet strength of evidence and patience. Hannah and Derek left the cabin the next morning, claiming they needed space. I didn't care. The isolation I had endured had taught me one thing. Survival doesn't need vindication. Survival needs clarity and control. The days after their departure were strangely quiet. I walked through the cabin, observing the empty spaces where laughter had once hidden manipulation. Leo ran freely, oblivious to the drama that had played out around him. I found a sense of relief in routine. Cooking meals, planning hikes, even unpacking supplies became acts of reclaiming normalcy. I contacted a family attorney to ensure legal safeguards. Hannah had manipulated finances, but she hadn't anticipated documentation and witness statements. Step by step, I began untangling the web, asserting boundaries, reclaiming accounts, and ensuring that our child remained my priority. Through it all, I reflected on trust. I realized how fragile it could be, how easily it could be weaponized by those closest to you. But I also realized the strength in observation, patience, and preparation. Manipulators can plan carefully, but they rarely anticipate consistency and vigilance. The following week, I started keeping a structured schedule for myself and Leo. We explored trails, cooked together, and talked about the world in a way that was safe and predictable. It was a stark contrast to the uncertainty that Hannah and Derek had created. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. Friends who had drifted away gradually returned once the truth emerged quietly in social circles. My brother's betrayal, while deep and painful, was acknowledged only between us. I didn't seek revenge. I didn't wish him harm. I only needed him to understand that trust is earned, not assumed. Weeks turned into months. I moved back to Portland, rented a small apartment, and rebuilt a life that was smaller, perhaps, but authentically mine. I avoided overly close bonds initially, wary of manipulation, but slowly learned to observe human behavior without paranoia. The lessons from betrayal were seared into my memory. I had become cautious, yes, but also resilient, strategic, and self-reliant. Every so often, I would encounter reminders of Hannah and Derek, their names in social posts, mutual friends asking awkwardly about the vacation, but I kept my composure. There was no satisfaction in confrontation anymore. The victory lay in survival, clarity, and control over my own life. I had weathered deception, betrayal, and isolation, and emerged stronger. Evenings with Leo became sacred. I cherished the simplicity of playtime, bedtime stories, and quiet walks. These moments were proof that life could continue, that love could exist without manipulation, and that one could rebuild after devastation. I realized that while betrayal had been painful, it had been transformative. I had learned the harsh reality of human nature, the subtlety of manipulation, and the power of patience and observation. By the end of the summer, the cabin was packed up. We left Estes Park with a sense of closure, if not joy. Hannah and Derek were no longer in our lives. The vacation that had begun with hope ended with lessons etched into memory, reminders of vigilance, resilience, and the importance of guarding trust. I often reflect on that summer. It was a crucible, painful, isolating, and revelatory. And through it all, one truth stands clear. Even when those closest to you betray every expectation, life continues, and those who survive such storms emerge stronger, wiser, and unshakably aware of their own strength. Betrayal may shape us, but it cannot define us. And for me, that realization was both a shield and a liberation.